Hello there, dear friends, and welcome once again to the Relaxed Fantasy Review. Today, we're going to be continuing our series on bad spells that I would consider to be traps. These are spells that, when you take them in game, you may think that they sound really awesome, that their effect is something that you could really make use of. And yet, when you finally try them out in game, there's some weird wording, or there's just a nuanced situation that very rarely comes up. And today we're going to talk about the Artificer. We're talking about first level spells today. We're talking about level 1, the Artificer gets to pick their first level spells. And they get a look at their spell list, and they're like, which spells should I take? These are the ones I've made a top 5 list, or I guess a bottom 5 list, of spells that I recommend Artificers avoid on their first foyer into first level spells. But before we get to the list, I'd like to let you know that Relaxed Fantasy Review has memberships. For just $1 a month, you can get some cool benefits. First, you get a little badge in your name in the comments, showing folks that you're a supporter and earning you my undying gratitude. You also get early access to the videos. I upload videos every other day, have done since the channel began, but I upload for members a day early. So if you want to join the channel, there's a join button just below the video. Click on that and you can watch my videos a day earlier than anyone else. If you don't want to support or can't, that's totally fine. The videos come out as normal and I'm not going to change their schedule. So thank you for supporting, for watching the content, and for just being here on YouTube. So Artificer first level spells. Let's start with an easy one. Alarm. Alarm is a spell that sounds ideal. You set up a area that is a 20-foot cube, or you can do this spell to a door or a window if you wish, and you cast it and it lasts for 8 hours, no concentration necessary. You set it up so that if a creature that you haven't designated, so when you cast the spell you designate creatures that don't trigger it, but any creature that you haven't designated that enters the area or opens the door, there is an alarm that goes off. You can choose whether the alarm is audible, so whether it creates the sound of a loud bell, or whether it's mental, whether you hear the alarm inside your mind. Either way, the spell wakes you up. You can set up this alarm as a ritual, so technically it doesn't cost you a spell slot. But there's one big problem with this, and that is that it only has one location. So if you've backed yourself up into a corner, there's one door that enters the room, or you're in a cave and there's a 20-foot entrance or less, then alarm could be useful and let your entire party rest. But it's generally accepted by the D&D community that because a long rest takes 8 hours, but you only need to be sleeping for 6 of those, it's overall assumed that if you're in a party of 3 or 4 people, you'll be able to take long rests and have a watch. You'll have somebody who's sitting up and awake. So the alarm spell is kind of redundant at that point. Obviously, there are some situations that it could be useful. It's just when you're choosing spells and you only can choose so many, artificers get to prepare their intelligence modifier plus half their artificer level. They get to pick 4 at level 1 most of the time. And yeah, it's just not worth it to take alarm. Like, it's just not gonna come in useful enough when you have a party that can just stand watch during long rests. So alarm has a niche use case, but I wouldn't take it personally. The next one is False Life. Now, False Life looks like a cool idea. You cast the spell as an action, and you give yourself temporary hit points. The temporary hit points are 1d4 plus 4. So that is usually about 6 or 7 temporary hit points that you give yourself. And that's not a bad thing to have. The only real issue is that this spell gives such a small amount of temporary hit points, and the scaling doesn't quite keep up. As you upcast the spell, you add 5 more temporary hit points for every level you upcast, meaning that you're getting an average of 6 or 7 at level 1, and then you're getting like 11 or 12 at level 2, and so on. And this means you have to be using your highest level spell slot just to get a good amount of temporary hit points. And it would be cool if this spell was the only way you could get temporary hit points, but there's so many ways you can get temporary hit points in this game. There are spells that grant you ones every single turn as long as concentration is kept. And False Life, it wouldn't be so bad if False Life wasn't an invocation for the Warlock. You see, this is a first level spell. You have to use a spell slot to cast it. A better choice, if you want an unlimited supply of temporary hit points, is to take the Warlock invocation that gives you False Life, that you can cast it at will. That's the real kicker here, is that the spell itself in a vacuum isn't terrible. It's just that there's much better ways of getting temporary hit points, and if you're really sold on False Life, you can become a Warlock with 2 levels to grab the invocation, or just take the Eldritch Depth feat, and then you don't have to use your spell slots on this. It's not worth taking as your leveled spells, because there are just better options out there. Moving along to other spells that have better options, let's talk about Jump. Jump is one of those spells that people tend to look at and go, oh. Because here's how it works. You cast Jump as an action, it lasts for 1 minute, concentration free, I'll give it that, and your jump distance is tripled. Now, how does jumping work in D&D? Well, there's 2 types of jump, long jump and high jump. If you make a running long jump, you can jump a number of feet equal to your strength score. We're talking about an Artificer here. Artificers don't typically have high strength, but even if you had a 10 in your strength, just your average strength, with a run-up, you could do a 10-foot jump. So you'd think with the jump spell, you could then do a 30-foot jump, which sounds cool. Then there's the high jumps. You can jump 3 feet plus your strength modifier straight up in the air, again, if you have a run-up, which means that if you have a strength modifier of 0, and you want to make a running high jump, you could go up to 9 feet in the air. The problem with this spell is that jumping has a weird little caveat in its mechanics, which says that when you jump, it uses your movement speed. You cannot jump further than your movement speed, meaning that if you want to move 50 feet in a turn, and you do a 10-foot running jump and manage to clear 30 feet, but your movement speed's only 30 feet, you're not even going to jump the 30 feet that jump gives you. You're going to do a 10-foot run-up, and then you're going to jump and make it 20 feet, and then your movement speed's going to run out. At which point you might as well have just walked the 30 feet. Yes, this could, in theory, get you over like a hazard, like a chasm, or help you jump up to clear a wall or something. But you know what else could do that? A rope. Basic adventuring gear, like a rope and a grappling hook, can be used to clear a wall, or to throw over a chasm and climb over. The jump spell doesn't give you extra movement. And that's why I have to put this on this list, because it'd be awesome if it tripled your jump speed and didn't care about your movement speed, because then you could do a 30-foot run-up and then jump and clear another 30 feet, effectively doubling your move speed. That would be fine. Jump can't do that. Jumping doesn't do that. So yeah, It just doesn't sell what it says it does. The fact that it says it triples your jump distance, but doesn't go over the jumping rules in the spell, is just a bait and switch. So I wouldn't take it. However, there is a spell that does help increase your movement speed relatively significantly, and that is Expeditious Retreat. You cast it as a bonus action, which is nice, and it takes your concentration, which isn't so nice, and lasts for 10 minutes. During the 10 minutes, and as well as when you cast the spell, you gain the ability to dash as a bonus action. So you can use your bonus action to double your movement speed. And in most games I've played in, dashing as a bonus action does not preclude you from dashing as an action. So if you're really trying to cover some ground and you can concentrate on this spell, you can move your movement speed, which is probably 30 feet, dash as a bonus action for another 30 feet, dash as an action, and you can move up to 90 feet in a turn. So why is this spell on the worst list? Well, there are a lot of great first level spells. And using your concentration to gain something that rogues get for free at level 2, where they can dash as a bonus action, or where a spell such as Misty Step could not only help you cover that extra 30 feet as a bonus action, but also teleport you. And yes, that's a second level spell. But the problem with Expeditious Retreat is that it does something that feels like it would be useful in combat, but the main reason that movement is restricted in combat isn't speed. Yeah, there's the first round where you have to close the gap. But as an Artificer, if you're trying to close the gap because you're like a heavily armored armorer, then Expeditious Retreat, using it as your concentration on the first round of combat is not going to be the best thing you can do. It's a tricky sell. I'd much rather use my concentration on something else and use an action to dash, personally. And if you need just a bit of extra speed, there is another spell, Longstrider, also a first level spell, that doesn't take concentration and increases your movement speed by 10 for an hour. So if you just need to move a bit faster, that's a better option. Expeditious Retreat eats your concentration, and the biggest issue for me is that moving around the battlefield, you're not afraid of running out of movement speed most of the time. The thing you're worried about is opportunity attacks. Moving past several enemies because you can move really fast means you're going to take a lot of stabs in the back. And Expeditious Retreat does nothing to avoid that. So, unfortunately, because of the way that it eats your concentration, I have to put this one on the worst list. It's not terrible if all you care about is moving really, really fast. Yeah, sure, you can use your action, bonus action, and movement speed and triple your speed. But that's a very weird situation because most of the time you're not going to need that much speed. Finally, on this list, the last spell that I would consider worst for an Artificer, Snare. Snare was a spell that was added to Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and Snare is a trap spell. Not just in the sense that it's not a good spell, but also because it literally makes a trap. You take a bunch of rope, you put it on the ground and cast the spell. The rope then disappears, and a magical trap is created. It's a 5-foot square area, so it's 1 square on the grid. And if a creature steps on it, the spell grabs them with the rope and suspends them in the air. The spell lasts for 8 hours, no concentration needed, and the creature will be hung there until the spell ends. But there's 2 major problems with this. First of all, the spell does have a saving throw, so if they make a dex save, the spell just ends and they aren't trapped. Which isn't so bad, but the problem is that they can repeat that save every single turn. So I need you to imagine this. You set up a snare trap so that you can capture somebody. You then wait for it to be triggered, they manage to step on the one space, because you've choked them in or something. The rope suspends them. They fail their first save. Oh, you hear your snare go off because you're off in the woods somewhere, so you start heading in that direction. 6 seconds later, the person gets to make another save. The average spellcaster at level 1 has a spellcasting ability score of 16, like an Artificer would have a 16 intelligence. That's pretty standard. That means that their spell save DC is going to be 13, assuming that this is a regular person that you're trying to snare with a 10 dexterity. All they have to roll is a 13 to avoid your trap, and then they have to roll a 13 to get out of it. That means that a third of the time, they're going to either make the initial save, or they're going to get out of it 6 seconds later, or 12 seconds later, or 18 seconds later. Unless you are literally within 30 feet of the person who's been snared, it's very likely that they're going to get out of your trap before you even can do anything with it. If they got to repeat the saving throw every minute or something, that would be much better. But the fact that they can repeat it after every single round, every 6 seconds, means that trapping a creature in this snare is all but useless, because you're never going to get to them before they get out of it. Even a creature with a low dexterity, if they had a 6 in their dexterity with a -2 penalty, a level 1 Artificer, they're still going to break out of your snare a quarter of the time. It just doesn't make sense. You would have to be right there, right next to the snare to make use of this. And if that was the case, then why not just ambush them? Why not just attack or, grapple them or something like that? There's so many other ways that you can surprise attack someone, and the snare spell just isn't it. It's not worth using your spells to do this. And yeah, that's the kind of vibe with all of these spells. In a vacuum, they might seem cool. They might have some very interesting uses some of the time. But those uses are either rare, or the spell just doesn't do what you expect it to do. And as a result, these are the worst 5 first level spells that I recommend Artificers stay away from. This has been the Relaxed Fantasy Review. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe down below. Have a look for the join button down there, and keep your eyes peeled for more spell reviews coming down the line soon. Have a good one, my friends.